Oh, no, no.
Joe
I'm not
Biden is
saying
approving more.
Biden's good on climate change. I'm just saying they're worse. Yet another
Wait,
reason to keep them at
Vosh,
bay.
Vosh, Biden has done more drilling, though, than Donald Trump. Under Biden's administration, gas drilling approvals outpaced Donald Trump's. According to the Washington Post, Biden is approving more oil and gas drilling permits on public lands than Donald Trump.
Oh wow, drilling is up under Joe Biden? And that's all there is to climate change policy. No discussion as to why it's up under Joe Biden. Or how relevant that even is, compared to all of the policies enacted by both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We're just supposed to look at the drilling numbers, pretend that it's the only metric relevant to climate change, and leave it at that. Wow guys, you're quite the climate activists. Here's a thought. Let's go over all the things you didn't see on Marianne Williamson's Twitter feed. Critical thinking lessons for the Vanguard. All right, friends, it's your boy Drunk Ronan, older, more frustrated, and ready to unload some more Occam's razor ordinance on some unlucky soul. Or very lucky soul, since they're going to receive a free education in critical thinking and will learn that there's much more to climate policy than the headlines that go viral on leftist Twitter.
Are you ready now to witness a power not seen for thousands of years?
In this case, we're talking about the Vanguard. But before I tear into them, let me compliment them on at least being head and shoulders better than Jimmy Dore and his bootlickers, like Nick Cruz, aka Socialist MMA, the strategy genius who's 0-1 in MMA, Justin Hinkle, and that creepy hard lens media guy. These Vanguard guys seem to legitimately care about leftist interests and aren't just concern trolling. On top of that, they bear a vague resemblance to Jay and Silent Bob. So I thank them for that. However, they still fall into the trap of having a very vague understanding of the policies they discuss. They seem more concerned with having an opinion on everything, and as a result, never seem to have a firm grasp on any one thing they discuss. In this case, we're discussing climate policies, as enacted by Donald Trump and Joe Biden. There is no comparison. Anyone who follows actual environmental groups and their takes, which, by the way, is the correct way, to stay on top of the effect of climate policy, as opposed to simply following Marianne Williamson on Twitter, knows that these two are miles apart. However, most people aren't going to follow environmentalist groups, and probably don't even think to do so. They end up following a content creator they feel they can relate to, who, in turn, are usually just repeating whichever headlines they came across on social media. So when it comes to the totality of climate change policy, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are light years apart. However, content creators like the Vanguard aren't really keeping track of all these policies. All they know is that they saw a headline on Twitter that said that drilling is up under Joe Biden, and to them, this means that Joe Biden is just as bad, if not worse, than Donald Trump when it comes to climate change.
Oh, no, no.
Joe
I'm not
Biden
saying
is approving
Biden's
more.
good on climate change. I'm just saying they're worse. Yet another reason to keep them at bay.
Vosh, Biden has done more drilling, though, than Donald Trump. Under Biden's administration, gas drilling approvals outpaced Donald Trump's. According to the Washington Post, Biden is approving more oil and gas drilling permits on public lands than Donald Trump.
Okay.
I don't think it's fair to say that if climate change is your number one issue, then that's a reason why you have to just keep voting for the Democrats, when I think this is one of the...
Are you earnestly suggesting that...
Now where he opened up offshore drilling in natural areas more than even Donald Trump had. He didn't.
Oh wow, drilling is up under Joe Biden? And that's all there is to climate change policy. No discussion as to why it's up under Joe Biden.
Oil companies stockpile drilling permits, challenging Biden on climate. Billings, Montana. In the closing months of the Trump administration, energy companies stockpiled enough drilling permits for Western public lands to keep pumping oil for years and undercut President-elect Joe Biden's plans to curb new drilling because of climate change, according to public records and industry analysts. An Associated Press analysis of government data shows the permit stockpiling has centered on oil-rich federal lands in New Mexico and Wyoming. It accelerated during the fall as Biden was cementing his lead over President Donald Trump and peaked in December, aided by speedier permitting approvals since Trump took office. The goal for companies is to lock in drilling rights on oil and gas leases on vast public lands where they make royalty payments on any resources extracted. Biden wants to end new drilling on those same lands as part of his overhaul of how Americans get energy, with the goal of making the nation carbon neutral by 2050. Companies submitted more than 3,000 drilling permit applications in a 3-month period that included the election, according to data from the U.S. Bureau of Land Management. Officials approved almost 1,400 drilling applications during that time amidst the pandemic. That's the highest number of approvals during Trump's 4-year term, according to AP's analysis. In Colorado, the administration issued more than 4,700 drilling permits in 2020, comparable to approval numbers from early last decade when oil topped $100 a barrel, roughly twice the current price. Invitation to drill. Making it easier to drill was a centerpiece of Trump's effort to boost American energy production, in part by enticing companies onto lands and offshore areas run by the U.S. Departments of Interior and Agriculture. Under Trump, crude production from federal and tribal lands and waters increased sharply, topping 1 billion barrels in 2019. That was up by almost a third from the last year of the Obama administration. With markets still in flux and oil producers slashing budgets, major companies nevertheless have been acquiring enough permits to keep pumping through Biden's upcoming term. The government approved about 500 new drilling permits in September, more than double the same month in 2019. The oil industry's fear is that Biden will follow through on campaign pledges and make it impossible or much harder to drill on public lands. You go from having a champion in the White House who steers the entire federal apparatus to wanting you to be successful, to someone who is hostile to the industry, said Tom Pyle, a former Republican aide on Capitol Hill who now leads the industry group American Energy Alliance. For Biden supporters, the stockpiling threatens parts of an ambitious climate agenda before the Democrat can get into the White House. Oil and gas extracted from public lands and waters generates the equivalent of almost 550 million tons, 500 metric tons, of greenhouse gases annually, the U.S. Geological Survey said in a 2018 study. Trump administration critics say officials enabled the industry to reach its goals, noting that Interior Secretary David Bernhard and others have boasted how speedily permits were processed. Bureau of Land Management spokesman Chris Tollefson said the agency had streamlined permitting while still following environmental laws. Markets, not the BLM, determine how oil and gas developers decide to acquire and develop leases, he said. Processing times for completed applications to the BLM have dropped from almost 140 days on average in the last year of Obama's administration to 44 days in fiscal year 2019, according to congressional testimony by Interior officials. In 2020, some companies had permits awarded in a little over a month, AP found. Other permits took longer, but an average could not be determined.
Or how relevant that even is, compared to all of the policies enacted by both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We're just supposed to look at the drilling numbers, pretend that it's the only metric relevant to climate change, and leave it at that. Wow, guys, you're quite the climate activists. Here's a thought. Let's go over all the things you didn't see on Marianne Williamson's Twitter feed. Drilling increased under Joe Biden because of a backlog left under Donald Trump. Trump not only made the application process quicker and easier, but companies locked in drilling rights after Biden won the election, but before he was sworn in, predicting that he would roll back Trump's lax policies. Here's a hint, he did, but those changes would take time to have an effect. This is why drilling surged, then plunged. During his first week in office, Joe Biden issued an executive order, pausing new drilling on federal lands. Guess what? A Trump-appointed federal judge defeated the executive order. Why? Because the government is obligated under the Mineral Leasing Act of 1920 to lease federal lands for drilling. And here's the thing. This is just one of thousands of ways that Trump's presidency contradicted leftist goals, but which will continue to fly under the radar with leftist content creators who won't bother to read beyond the headlines they see on Twitter, thereby giving Trump a pass. This lack of knowledge over policy is a serious problem with this portion of the online left. They don't even seem to understand how drilling permits work. From the way they discuss the increase in drilling, it's as though they think that the president is the one deciding how many applications oil companies are going to submit. And then there is every other policy around climate change that is not drilling. Joe Biden has done a number of things, including, but not limited to, the Inflation Reduction Act, which more than offsets whatever meager increase we'll see from an increase in drilling. Donald Trump, by comparison, did a number of things to roll back progress on climate change. However, these things don't even cross the Vanguard's radar. Somehow it doesn't cross their mind to do some basic research on the reason for the uptick in drilling, nor how this even squares in the grand scheme of climate change. I'm a bit frustrated because we can expect this from, say, Jimmy Dore, who's made a career of being the Republican Party's cabin boy by running this sort of interference, but the Vanguard kids should be far better than this. Well, that's it for now.
Let me get a nickel bag.
$15, little man. Put that shit in my hand. If that money doesn't show, then you owe me, oh. My jungle love, yeah. Oh. I think I wanna know ya. Yeah, what?
What the hell are you singing?
You don't know Jungle Love? That shit is the Mad Notes. Written by God herself and handed down to the greatest band in the world. The motherfucking time!